It's time now for State Your Case with George Corda on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. State Your Case is brought to you by Christian Healthcare Ministries. Now, here's your host, George Corda.
Well, hey, folks, this is clearly not George Corda. This is Jamie Satterfield. I am the legal affairs correspondent for the Knoxville News Sentinel, and I am filling in for George today on State Your Case. And we have a really special show today. So I want to go ahead and give you the numbers to call because you want to probably ask these folks questions. So it's 656-TALK. That's 656-8255, I believe that translates. And 1-800-951-TALK. So those are the two numbers. George is out of town, and he asked me to fill in today, and it is my honor to have in the studio, I've got 3 workers here from the Kingston coal ash spill back in 2008. If y'all remember, it was the nation's largest coal ash spill. It smothered, 300 acres with this coal ash. And as you may remember, TVA threw a lot of money at Roane County, and the citizens who lived around this spill, it was real TVA's fault. And so the effort was on cleaning it up and keeping the public from being scared to death. That was TVA's goal. And the folks who paid the price for that are here in my studio, and that is coal ash workers. And if you followed my reporting at all, you know that the workers were summoned basically in the middle of the night to go and start this cleanup process. They weren't told anything about coal ash, that it's dangerous, that it's got all kinds of heavy metals and chemicals, arsenic and radium, and just go down the list. So they weren't told anything about it. And then once they got into it, and they started experiencing health issues, they were lied to. We've proven that. They were told that that coal ash was safe, told they could eat it, they could drink it, which they did, unfortunately. And more importantly, they weren't provided any kind of protective gear. And if they ask for protective gear, and I'm talking basic mask you buy if you're painting or sanding at your house, they weren't provided those. And if they asked for a respirator, if a doctor prescribed them a respirator, they were told that they would lose their jobs, and a couple of them did. And now what's happened, there were 900 workers at the height of the cleanup. 400 to 500 were in the most dangerous part of that site called the exclusion zone. And now we have over half of them are sick or dead. And from medical conditions specifically associated with the long-term exposure of coal ash. And so that's what we're here about. And I've got as my guest today Jeff Brewer from Newmarket. Am I right, Jeff? John Cox, he's from Halls. Yeah. It's been a while since I've talked to some of these folks. And Ansol Clark and his wife Janie, they're from here in Knoxville. All 3 of these fellows worked on this site. And I want to allow you to hear what's going on, because the situation is that not only were they lied to and denied protective gear, but as they started becoming sick and making complaints, they've hit nothing but a brick wall. And we've got some attorneys in town who are now suing Jacobs Engineering. We're going to talk about them, but that's the company that was in charge of keeping these workers safe, and that TVA ratepayers paid millions to keep safe, and they're suing them in court. But I'll just tell you, it's an uphill battle, and these folks have to pay their own medical bills, their own legal bills. It's a travesty. Think about showing up at your job, expecting to work and get paid, and instead you walk away with a disease that's going to kill you. So I've spent too much time talking, but very quickly I'm going to just go around before we hit the break. And Jeff, tell me when you went on the site and what your job was.
I went on the job at March the 15th of 2010. My job was as a teamster to haul the coal ash, place it wherever we need to place it, just keep it moving.
Okay. And John, when did you start, and what was your deal?
I started in June of 08, I think, 09. And when I first went there, I didn't actually work in the coal ash. I worked on the backside at the gypsum pond. But as their cleanup ramped up, they would just randomly, if we were kind of slow, they would just randomly send us over there into that to help with that cleanup with no training, no anything. Just go over the hill and work in the ash over there. And if you ask, is it okay? I mean, what's over there? Oh, it's all right. It won't hurt you.
Right.
And that's how I ended up over there. The gypsum pond ended, and I got transferred straight over there.
Okay. And Ansel?
I started at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 8th when it blowed out. I was there that morning at 5 o'clock. I started working on a fuel truck, and I worked on that fuel truck for 5 years. And I delivered around 3,000 gallons of fuel to each piece of equipment there every day. And I was on every site that they was. I covered it all from one word to the go.
All right. And we're talking a good bit of time. All three of you spent out there years, right?
I spent 5 years.
Yes.
Okay.
At 7 days a week, 15 hours a day for the majority of it.
And it was mandatory that we work.
Yes.
Right.
We didn't. I worked 94 days without a day off, 15 hours, 7 days a week.
Right. Now, and if you were out in Rome County at all, right in the aftermath of this spill, you probably saw people in Tyvek suits and all this kind of protective gear. But that was the EPA people who were paying no attention to the workers. I just got to throw that in there. The EPA suited up for this, but they walked right past workers, standing there with nothing but a reflective vest, T-shirt, jeans, and a hard hat. So we're coming up on a break. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to talk about what they experienced, how they came to believe that this coal ash was making them sick. And we're also going to talk about particularly some secret videos that they took that proves the case that Jacobs Engineering intentionally not only denied them a protective gear, but also monkeyed with test results that the public was relying upon when they were being assured that coal ash was safe. And so we're going to get into all of that when we come back. And certainly want you to call in if you're interested in this. It's 656-TALK. That's 656-8255 or 1-800-951-TALK. So when we come back, we're going to hear the All right. It's definitely a bad moon rising over in Kingston when Jacobs Engineering was in charge. And this is a California company, by the way, big old government contractor. They make, let's see, I'm looking at their earnings report. In quarter 2, 2018, they made net earnings of $143.9 million. And a lot of that is TVA money, your ratepayer money, because they do jobs all over the country. And TVA, by the way, is paying, you are paying the legal bills for Jacobs Engineering to deny these workers any kind of justice in court. So keep that in mind. As you can see, I'm a little passionate about it. Now, Ansel, tell me when and under what circumstances you first started thinking something was wrong out there.
I got up to go to work one morning, and before I could put my clothes on, I fell in the floor, passed out cold. And when I come around and started trying to get up, my wife told me just to lay there and don't try to get up. And I still kept trying to get up, and I couldn't. And so she called my foreman and told him that I wouldn't be in that day. And then after that, I started having dizzy spells. And then after the dizzy spells, I got congestive heart failure. And they put me in the hospital and took 40 pounds of fluid off of me. So
Now, when you how old a man are you?
I'm 67 years old.
Now, when you started out there, how old were you?
I was 60 years old.
Now, were you healthy or not?
I had never been to the doctor in 35 years. I've got a family doctor that will testify that I was the healthiest man that he'd ever run across. Okay. And I had a DOT physical every year, or every 2 years, and I passed them all with flying colors until I started working that job.
So when you started getting sick, was your first thought it's the coal ash?
No, I figured that it was where I was working 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was not getting but about 4.5 hours sleep a night, and going and going and going. And the job that I had, we worked. We pull fuel hoses for 100 feet, and that's a 2-inch fuel hose, and it holds 11 gallons of fuel in 100 foot. So
hard work.
It was hard work, and then after I started getting sick and everything, and kind of figuring it out, and started talking to a few more people that were getting sick, we figured, well, there's something wrong, and the dust out there would get in your mouth, and it would make your saliva real greasy and sticky. And so that's when we wanting our dust mask and our respirators, but they wouldn't give them. They said no, it wouldn't. No, they wasn't nothing in the coal ash that would hurt us. And that was every morning at safety meeting that they would say that.
And to be clear, Jacobs was all about safety of equipment, and they were all nitpicky about things that would cost them money.
Yes, anything that would cost them money.
They had daily safety meetings.
Right. And they didn't want to spend no money to protect us, because if the public seen us over there in Tyvek suits and dust masks, that would make them ask questions. So they was covering it up with everything they had. And when I started getting sick, I went to the nurse and asked her for a list of doctors, and they would not give us a list of doctors or any phone numbers.
Even though the contract they were under required that.
Required it, yes. Then we went to Tom Bach, and Tom Bach would not give us...
Now, let's tell people who Tom Bach is.
Tom Bach was the head safety man at Kingston.
For Jacobs
Engineering. For Jacobs Engineering. And that's, who we would have to go through in order to get any kind of answer on anything that we had.
And what did Tom Bach say when you asked him?
He said that he didn't give out dust masks. That we didn't need dust mask on that work site.
Now, folks, you can just Google Kingston ash spill and environmental. Google anything related to it, and you can find videos of this ash flying through the air. And we've got pictures of workers who were just really literally covered in the stuff. So picture that when these guys are asking for dust masks. This is not like I sanded my cabinets recently to paint. That created some dust. This ain't that. This is like, just imagine being in a sandstorm in the Middle East. That's what that site was like constantly. And so you had the ash flying through the air, and then you also had the sludgy part, which they're in their bodies with. So they started having skin issues too. John, tell me a little bit about when you started experiencing health issues.
Well, actually, my first experiences with it was, I think it was in the winter time, and I noticed inside my nose it was almost like a pimple, and you couldn't even touch your nose. It would get so sore inside, And I started getting places on my skin, and I still have them now. I mean, I could show them if this was TV, but I've got places all over me, just little scars and stuff from where these places came up. But then I started getting a persistent cough, and I went to my doctor, and he said, well, you've got bronchitis. And he gave me some antibiotics. Well, it didn't go away. And after about 4 different rounds changing antibiotics, one day I just thought, well, maybe it's something I'm working in. So I took the paperwork that showed what was in that ash to him and said, well, this is what I work in. Could it be causing it? And he looked at it, and he left the room, and he came back, and he said, we're sending you to a pulmonary doctor, and we're going to get you to one quick. So when I went to the pulmonary doctor, I went in with the paper and showed him what was in it and told him, he said, well, you wear a dust mask, don't you? And I said, no, they won't allow us to wear a dust mask. Our foremans, and I've probably heard 100 times at least that if you ask for a dust mask, their famous saying is they'll run you off. And so anyway, he said, well, you're going to wear one from now on. He said, you don't need to be even working in that, much less working without protection. And so I go back with my prescription, and I've actually got it on tape. I asked Tom Bach about if we'd be run off if we wore a dust mask, and he said, well, that's what they say. And I laid it on his desk and informed him that I guess they better get to running because I wasn't going back in there without one. And he said, well, I've got to talk to people. I don't know what I need to do.
For a basic dust mask,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
So he left me sitting, and the best of my recollection, I sat in what they call Trailer City with all these big bosses going by glaring at me, not saying anything, but glaring like, we'll get you, for about 3 days. And I'm thinking the whole time that, well, they're going to fire me. They're just trying to figure out how. Mm-hmm. Finally, he comes out with a piece of paper that was TVA's paper. That was what their protocol was on that. And I had to go see a doctor. He had to test me that I could breathe without passing out or whatever through this dust mask. And I had to buy my own dust mask to wear down there. But the funniest thing about it all was when I handed Tom Bach the dust mask prescription.
A prescription for a dust mask. Keep that in mind, folks. That kills me.
Yes. And he asked me and the guy, the union steward at the time down there, Dave Thompson, who's also really sick, to step out on the porch while he made some phone calls. And he had a window in his office. And he proceeded, while we stood there looking at him wide-eyed like he had lost his mind, to walk over and beat his head on the wall.
Why?
I guess he had never had anybody stand up and say, I'm this... this is where the rubber meets the road. I'm not. But he tried for 3 days to tell me I needed to go back to work, and he'd let me know about the dust mask. And I said, you don't understand. I'm not going back in there without it.
Yeah.
But they tried to convince me to, but I would not.
It just blows my mind. And I'll be frank with you folks. When I first started working on this story, I was a little suspicious of some of this stuff, but it's absolutely true. This stuff is all documented. And
the cover-up is not quit.
Oh, no.
They're covering up from their shareholders that there's people died. 30-something of them, from what I understand, have died from this. There's still a ton of people that I know that will not get on this lawsuit that are sick because they're afraid that if they get on it, when a job comes up, if it's TVA or Jacobs is involved, that they'll be blackballed and they won't be allowed to work.
Right.
I know people that their wives had miscarriages that would not get on this lawsuit because they were afraid they would get blackballed from a job.
So it just keeps going.
Yes, and they've not informed shareholders or anything of this, and they're still raking in all these billions of dollars. And, you know, at one point, their shareholders should know this. I wouldn't want to own stock in a company that was this irresponsible.
Right. And I will say, in fairness, I've reached out to Jacobs Engineering and Tom Bach, and they are not talking, and their legal counsel, they got a couple of big powerhouse law firms, and they both say, well, we'll do our fighting in court. So that's why you're not hearing from them. And just so you'll know, Jamie here, Ansel's wife, has provided me with some court documents that I haven't looked at in a while to remind me that Jacobs is actually part of their defense is to say it's the workers' own fault. Can you believe that? They wouldn't give them gear. They'd fire them if they asked for it. But now they're going to say, hey, you know, if we're guilty, then the workers are to blame. They've also taken the tack to blame TBA. And here's another thing that's in here where they say that if the workers are right, then heck, they had to get it cleaned up quick because it was so dangerous. It just kills me. This case is the most strange case I have seen. It's movie material. But we've got a break coming up, and then when we come back, we're going to hear a little bit from Jeff Brewer. And if you've got questions or comments about this, the numbers are 656-TALK, 1-800-9. Ooh, we're having a Credence day. So you can tell I'm not as good as George Corda because he wouldn't have stomped on that music right there, but I did. This is Jamie Satterfield. I'm with the Knoxville News Sentinel, and I'm filling in for George Corda on State Your Case. And today it is my pleasure to have some workers who have been treated really wrongly. They worked in the Kingston coal ash spill back in 2008 without protective gear. They were denied protective gear, lied to about the dangers of coal ash. And let me tell you, folks, coal ash is in a lot of stuff. TVA sells this and makes millions, and it's full of dangerous chemicals. And, you know, a limited exposure might be okay. It's never okay to be exposed to this stuff, but these workers were immersed in this stuff 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for months and years. And these folks are here in the studio would actually consider themselves lucky because they're still breathing. We've had over a dozen, 2 dozen folks who have died as a result of conditions that have been linked to coal ash. One of them, Mike Shelton, died very soon after leaving this site, and he left behind his wife, who was a home. I don't know what the right word is, but she didn't work. She took care of her home. That's how she worked. Loved her husband. Their marriage was pretty much everything to her. And, he went to work to make things better for them. They were going to, this job paid well, and they were going to do some stuff on their house. And, they were both real excited about it. And then Mike started coming home sicker than a dog, and kept getting worse. And she begged him not to go back. But you know what? He had to make money. I have to make money. We all have to make money. And of course he's being told that it's safe and it's all in his head, and he died a very short time after that, and poor Angie's world just kind of got blown apart. And that's just one story. It's just one story. Today I've got with me Ansol Clark, John Cox, and Jeff Brewer. They're all from right here in East Tennessee. And each of them has suffered as a result of working out on the spill, thinking they were doing a good thing, and they were helping restore this community, but they paid the price for it. And I want to hear a little bit from Jeff Brewer. And I told Jeff, I put him on the spot. I've watched his deposition, and he has a story to tell that really, and this is why I want him to tell the story. I have met with many of these workers, and they're just salt of the earth people. They are good people. And so I want you to get to know a little bit about him. And Jeff has a perfect story that's a real sign of his character. So, Jeff, tell me about the job you had delivering beer and why you left.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Jamie, to you and News Talk 98.7 for giving us this opportunity.
You're welcome. It's our
pleasure. I did work for a local beer company years ago, and I was running from the Lord a lot then, but I was looking at providing for my wife at the time, and we had just had a small child. She was about 2 weeks old, and the straw that broke the camel's back, as the Lord puts it. I was in a store and I was delivering, and I stocked my shelf and dressed it nice like we were supposed to. And a man come in with a little girl. She's about 2 years old, just barely walking good. Wanted a candy bar. We're talking about 50 cents then. And he told her no, couldn't have it. He didn't have the money. But he walked over and picked up my quart of beer that I put on that shelf. The Lord broke my heart that day. He opened my eyes to where I needed to be. So I turned my keys in that day.
That day, people. That day.
My wife we had just bought a home. She was hysteric. What are we going to do? You ain't got a job. But the Lord answered prayers. That Friday, I got a call from another company to go work.
Now, how did you wind up at the coal ash field?
Well, at the coal ash field, it was, of course, what people don't realize, this happened right during the recession.
That's true.
And I was a victim of the recession. A company that I worked for many years driving, they merged, and the bottom man had 28 years. The rest of us had to hit the street. Took a layoff. Due to that, the opportunity came that I could go and work at the Kingston ash site. And that's what I done to provide for my family during this recession, because everybody was begging for jobs, needing a job. And this was a good paying job. But during that time, we went to work, and I didn't think nothing about it. There was a few of us used to walk in and out to our trucks to get some exercise, because you was in the truck 12, 16 hours a day. And I became getting shortness of breath. We'd have to stop on the little walkway just to catch our breath to go on to the Berkshire house where we used to have to clock out and brass out, as they call it. And these problems just kept continuing, and my blood pressure went crazy, got out. I mean, I'm talking about 150 over 120. That was a good day. So I had a concern. My doctor thought I was maybe having a heart attack, but it was strange from, I was young. He didn't think of that, but he sent me for tests, echograms, nuclear stress test upon my heart. Then he done the pulmonary test, and then that's when he found I've got an obstructive lung disease now.
And you'd had no medical problems up to this point in terms of this
When
condition.
I went to work at Kingston Ash site, the only thing I took was an Allegra for my allergies. Then, I went to talk to Tom after I told him about getting sick.
Tom Bach, right?
Worked for Jacobson. Their response was to us is, "Oh, it's just allergies. Take you an extra pill." And I told him, I said, no, I've had allergies when I was a kid. And I said, I know what allergies are. This is not allergies. I'd like to see a doctor. Week went by. Never heard nothing. So I went to my foreman, spoke to him, and just kept getting blowed off, ignored. During that time, had a lot of burning of the eyes, nosebleeds, the breathing problem, still had the breathing problem, the blood pressure, thank goodness to the doctors, they're still trying to keep it regulated. There's times that my heart I can feel it flutter.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is years after you've left the site. You're still experiencing stuff.
Yeah, I left that site in 2014, August of 2014. After leaving that site 8 months, I went to another TVA job in Jefferson City, raising the dam up there, and I continued to cough up this clear jelly-looking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For 8 months, I coughed that up, and still I have coughing fits every now and then. That's why I have a bottle of water with me today, just in case to try to keep my mouth moist. But fatigueness, that was a great big issue. I'd be sitting in the truck waiting to be loaded, and I'd just drop out. I don't know whether it was a sleep or a blackout or passing out. You just fall out. And guys would come over and knock on your door or holler at you on the radio and get you to pull forward and reload again. And we've got to where I got a great concern, and that's when we found out a lot of the issues, talking to the other guys during lunch. They kept a lot of crafts at each other's throats so they wouldn't talk.
Right.
But, we was there for years.
Mm-hmm.
We became family.
Right.
And we're still family. I think about Mike Shelton. You mentioned him. I worked beside Mike Shelton daily, hauling that.
Yeah.
And his love of his life. He always talked about Angie.
Yeah.
Then not only him, we've got Jackie Sherrard. He suffered. He couldn't keep his blood pressure. Diabetes was going crazy with him down there. He would, at lunch, he wouldn't even eat. He would lay down in his truck to recuperate. He was in such agony. It's allergies. Take you an extra pill.
For the cost of a dust mask, one of the things that I would love for Jacobs to tell me is why. Why? Why wouldn't you even let a worker wear a dust mask they bought themselves? Had to be financial incentive, clearly. And we also know that there was a good bit of concern about what the public would think. So you're hearing that a dust mask. I just want everybody to go to Home Depot, pick up a dust mask, and look at it. That's what they wouldn't even allow these workers to have, and that's just extraordinary to me. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and if you've got questions or comments, please call in 656-TALK. 1-800-951-TALK is a toll-free number. And we will be back and hear more from these precious workers. So thank you. All right. Oh, man, he is good on the music today. He's playing my generation. All right, this is Jamie Satterfield. I am the legal affairs correspondent. That's just a name I made up. I write about courts and crime for the News Sentinel. And I'm filling in for George Corda. This is State Your Case, George's show on Sunday. I'm usually a guest of his every month, but he's had me guest host. And I decided that today I was going to take advantage of my guest hosting here to share with you the stories of some folks that's been done really wrong in our community by an outside company that I do not know if Jacobs Engineering's investors are aware of this lawsuit. They're supposed to be. And I don't know if they're aware of how many people have died according to the lawsuit, because of Jacobs' negligence and, just the things that they did or did not do. And like I say, I haven't been. Jacobs is not talking. Jacobs Engineering, by the way, has a long history of incidents involving worker safety. The Slim Jim plant, y'all may remember that. Was it South Carolina?
North Carolina. It
blew up, and deaths there, and that was a Jacobs site, as a for instance. That's one off the top of my head, but. They have a history of allegations, anyway, of shortchanging worker safety in order to get bonuses, get jobs done quicker. Safety just doesn't seem to be important to them. And if y'all remember, was it the Pinto? Somebody's always telling me I get my car wrong, but there was an incident where a company, and I want to say it was Pinto. But they did a cost benefit analysis, and they go, yeah, this is dangerous, but it'll cost this much to fix it. And Ford, yeah, he's telling me it's Ford. But it would cost this much to fix it. But if X number of people die and they sue us and we pay out this amount, and so they do this whole cost benefit analysis, which is more cheap for them, to let people die and keep quiet about the defective condition or fix it. Same thing here. Cheaper to deny them protection and push these workers to get this stuff done so they could get bonuses. I have not yet gotten all the records involved in this, but I bet you somewhere I will find somebody did a cost benefit analysis and decided that these workers' lives simply, it was cheaper to let them get sick and die.
They are called bean counters.
Bean counters, there we go, that's the answer, yeah. Ansel, tell me about where you all started seeing common symptoms. Let's talk about some of the common things that y'all started experiencing among workers.
Oh, well, I had 5 different people that worked on the fuel truck with me, and one of them had been on there for about 6 months, and he started getting dizzy, having dizzy spells, and they had to take him off of my truck and put another man on there. And that man lasted for maybe about a year. And then he started having dizzy symptoms. And so they took him off and put another one on there. So I had 5 different people on that truck in 5 years. But I was the only one that stayed on that truck for the full time. And I would get dizzy. And I'd just be driving and get dizzy, and I'd have to stop my truck and sit still until I got over that dizzy spell. And I couldn't figure out what is it? Am I about to have a stroke or what is it? And I would sit there till I get okay, and then I'd drive again. And that went on for about 3 years, and then I started blacking out. And when I would black out, you just fall wherever you're at. It doesn't make no difference. You just went down, and then when you come around, you kind of shake it off and get up and hold yourself together for a little while. And the people that I worked with would notice that I was dizzy, and I'd have to get out of the truck and go somewhere and sit down, and get away from that truck till I could go actually get back in the truck and drive it again.
Yeah.
But I had a job to do, and I was reaching retirement age, and I liked about 3 months being able to retire, and I worked that 3 months, and then I took my retirement. I quit early to get away from it because I didn't want to pass out behind the wheel and hurt somebody. It was It's just tough. The way, if I hadn't got sick, I'd have worked right on.
Mm-hmm.
But like I told you, I had for 35 years never been to a doctor except for a DOT physical.
Right.
And then we started breathing all that stuff, and my blood pressure goes crazy now. Like we was talking about, it goes up and down, and my heart rate is 43 beats a minute.
You had a stroke.
I've had a stroke, congestive heart failure. It's just ongoing. Then I also have a blood disease.
A very
rare blood disease, and it's called polycythemia vera. And there's only 100,000 people in the whole United States that have it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that all came from being exposed down there.
You didn't work after that. You didn't go somewhere else? Because that's one of the things that Jacobs is going to try to claim. Let me see. I always have trouble taking calls, frankly, because this is not my normal job. But I'm going to see if I can get up. Got Anna on here. Let's see. They tell me it's not lighting up at all, so he'll probably have to look at it. If you are on hold, I promise on the next break we'll get this squared away. This is my fault, not the guy in the booth. It's mine. They tell me I'm supposed to just hold it down, and it doesn't.
There it was.
Oh, is it on? Oh, okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Anna, oh, great. What have you got to say on this?
Well, first of all, I think it's horrible what happened to these people. And I remember reading the series in the Sentinel and was stunned that a major corporation like Jacobs would have behaved in such a way. It's unconscionable. I did have a question or two, and I admit I just turned it on several minutes ago, so you may have already discussed it. I know that both the EPA, after the spill occurred, the EPA and what's the Tennessee agency?
TDEC.
Yes, I know that they tested the ash, right?
Yeah, well, there was some initial testing, and it found extremely high levels of arsenic.
Okay.
But what happened was that TVA really, and we have this on paper, essentially bullied the EPA, as did Jacobs. They were both at these meetings to allow Jacobs to handle the testing. And what we now know, because we have videos that these workers secretly filmed, that the monitors that were being used to capture this flash and test it, that they were monkeyed with. They were dumping the ash out, which affected the results, and also they were watering down all around the monitors so that it would skew the results. And at some point, it's in one of my stories, I can't remember the date right off my head, but at one point they quit testing for anything. So TDEC was misled. Don't know why the state of Tennessee doesn't care. EPA was bullied and kowtowed. That's what my investigation found. So that's kind of addresses that. We're coming up on a break, so if you'll hang on, and we've got some other callers here, and then of course we're going to talk to our workers some more. We're doing the full 2 hours on this. So 656-TALK, 1-800-951-TALK is the number.
It's time now for State Your Case with George Corda on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. State Your Case is brought to you by Christian Healthcare Ministries. Now, here's your host, George Corda.
Well, I was going to try to sound like George, but I'm too redneck and womanly. So George is actually taking a break, and this is Jamie Satterfield with Knoxville News Sentinel, legal affairs correspondent. General rock star of the Sentinel. No, I'm kidding. I am here today, very honored to be able to have some workers at the Kingston coal ash spill back in 2008 who were lied to about the dangers of coal ash, were denied protective gear, were punished with losing their jobs if they demanded any kind of protective gear. And now hundreds of them are sick and dozens of them are dead. And Jacobs Engineering was a California company that TVA hired and ratepayers paid to clean up this mess and to keep workers safe. And they are now being sued in federal and state court. But folks, I tell you, these folks are paying their own medical bills, their own legal bills. There's no doubt that what I have described in a series of stories that I've done on this, no doubt that it happened. We've got the records, we've got videos, we've got the photos. But believe it or not, this case, particularly in federal court, is in jeopardy right now. And here's the irony of all this. They lie to them, deny them protective gear, they immerse them 12, 18-hour days, 7 days a week in very toxic coal ash. You look at, there's over 26, I stopped counting at 26 different kinds of chemicals and heavy metals in this stuff. But now, after all of this, there's a big question about whether they're going to be able to see any justice, because it's now on the workers who were sickened to have to prove that the conditions that they have were the result of this exposure before they can even get to damages. They're going to have to bring in experts. And what part of the problem here is this stuff hasn't been tested, as Jeff was talking while we were on a break. We haven't tested long-term exposure of workers, so there's not a lot of data on this. Now, I will say that Duke Engineering, 2 years before this coal ash spill, got a hold of one of their records on coal ash and workers. And they, back in 2007, were saying that their workers needed to be in full gear, full suits, protection from head to toe. And that's Duke Engineering, who, just like TVA, is in the business of making money. And of course, Duke is not a good actor here. They've been accused of lots of things involving workers and coal ash and groundwater and all of that. But that was 2 years before, so there's no excuse for Jacobs Engineering, a company that works and does jobs for DOE and TVA and lots of government agencies involving coal ash, for them to say they had no idea that this stuff was dangerous. It just doesn't seem to fly with me. Now, I've got with me today, I've got Ansol Clark and his lovely wife Janie, and John Cox and Jeff Brewer, all three East Tennesseans who are now sick as a result of the exposure to coal ash. And I do want to say very quickly that after I started reporting on this, TVA erected signs saying that their workers were now required to wear protective gear when they were around coal ash. So why it's now something they're worried about and why no one was worried back then, I guess, is a big mystery. Now, this is a real David and Goliath kind of case. Jacobs is represented by, as you can imagine, some very powerful law firms. These folks have some really great lawyers, but they are not as well heeled in terms of resources. And Jim Scott, and I'm going to miss somebody, Jim Scott, John Dupree, Keith Stewart, Tyler Roper, I hope I'm getting that right, he's new in this mix. But 4 lawyers who just work around here in town, and they have taken this on, and they're doing a great job. And one of them is on the line, so I'm going to see if I can get him on. Jim Scott. Jim, are you with us?
Yeah, Jamie, thank you for having me on, and thank you for listening to these people and giving them a voice.
Well, you're welcome. What can you? I have to tell people that these lawyers are bound by federal rules, so it's difficult for them to be able to weigh in on the merits of the case. But
well,
what do you want people to know, Jim?
I don't want to. I'm obviously not going to violate any federal rules, but one of the things that is important for the public to know is that this isn't about a lawsuit. This is about people. This is about what the ratepayers would have wanted TVA to contract for. And in particular, there's one story that I hope you touch on. I'm not going to reference his name, but he's got a double lung transplant. And,
Craig
had one. His lungs aren't taken. But you went a long way to, throughout your investigation of this, to give him hope and make him feel like he has a chance to go through the difficult times, the health expenses, and everything else that's associated with something like this, and also help him to hopefully survive. But he's having a very difficult time right now, so if everybody could keep him in their prayers, that would be very important. But as far as the resources we've got, we feel a bit more comfortable. We do like the David versus Goliath theme that may be portrayed, but when it boils down to it, like I said, this case is about people. And one of the things that I don't think the general public really understands in cases like this, that are of this magnitude, that there's of such a public health concern, not only to the people that work there and good people like Ansol Clark and Jeff Brewer, but they're also a health concern to the local community. And there's unfortunately going to be more people medically affected, because I have been, I've still been receiving calls, and I won't take people unless we get some sort of doctor verification one way or the other. It's got to be about merit. And in essence, the whole key to this problem has been that there was, number one, a cover-up. There was, a highly impermissible exposure. The air monitor readings, I think, with the EPA were invalidated up until about 2011 when they shipped it off, and I think this is a matter of public record. Then on top of that, the EPA recommended to Jacobs that these guys be provided Tyvek and respirators, and Jacobs still took the ratepayer money and did not do that. So I want to applaud you for helping these people, but unfortunately more are going to be affected, and I still can't believe that Jacobs didn't have more integrity in educating the Roane County community on the issue, in particular the workers, as well as now their investors. Because when it boils down to it, if I were an investor in a company, this isn't, just a matter of good policy. It's a matter of sound policy that borders on criminality, and you would think that the investors would be educated on it and at least notified, because they have a right to know too, just like these people had a right to know about the constituents that were in there, that they were misled about. The investors of Jacobs Engineering have a right to know what has happened to these people, and the fact that this community has had to incur approximately $100 million in medical expenses.
All right. Well,
along
Jim,
with death. So
we're
I
coming
want to
up on
applaud
a
what
break.
you're doing and those clients, and I'll, like I said, I don't want to say anything further because I want to make sure I'm in compliance with the federal rules of court. But these people need your attention, and they need the local governments and local people's help in this regard. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for taking this case. All right, folks, we've got another break coming up, and when we come back, we're going to hear more from Ansol Clark and John Cox and Jeff Brewer, who are all workers who have been sickened as a result of working at the Kingston coal ash spill. So when we come back, we're going to hear some more from them. And I am going to tell you about Craig, our double lung transplant fella, when we come back. So stay tuned. All right, folks, we are back. This is George Corda's State Your Case on News Talk 98.7. I guess I ought to identify the station every now and then. This is why I'm not a regular host, people, because I just don't know what I'm doing. This is Jamie Satterfield. I'm with a legal affairs correspondent with the Knoxville News Sentinel. I have been, for about a year and a half, I guess, I feel like anyway, looking into the treatment of workers at the Kingston coal ash spill. Hundreds are sick, dozens are dead. And so I've got some workers here who are talking about their experience out there. I very quickly wanted to tell you, earlier, one of the attorneys involved in this case mentioned this fellow Craig, who's had to have a double lung transplant. And I wanted to tell you real quick the story of how I first came to talk to him. I was looking for workers who were impacted and had been given his name and number. And he lives, so is it New York? Is that where Craig lives? Somewhere up north. Yeah, and so I called and I introduced myself and told him what I was wanting to expose this. And he sounded really funny. And of course, I didn't know what his normal voice was, but he sounded just troubled. And he said he didn't want to talk about it. And it surprised me a little bit. I thought he'd be, because he was early on involved in this lawsuit. And, he was polite, but he just said he didn't feel like talking. He hung up. And so I just, okay, I'll move on to the next number I have. Well, about 30 minutes later, he called me back. And I'm going to try to tell this without crying. He told me that when I called, he was getting ready to go out in his shed, and he was going to shoot himself. At that point, his lungs were failing, and he had no hope whatsoever of a transplant or anything at that point. But what he was most depressed about is that nobody seemed to care, Nobody seemed to care, and he just wanted people to know what happened. And so what he said was that because I called, if I would just tell his story, he said, if you'll just give us a voice, I'm going to hang on. And that's why I have continued and will continue to tell the story and allow you to hear it. Craig has since had a double lung transplant. But still not doing well, inevitably going to die. And he's going to die because he showed up for work. He showed up for work and then was lied to, and wasn't given gear that he needed, as all these workers were treated in this manner, so that Jacobs Engineering could get done with this cleanup quickly, and earn bonuses, and so that people in Rome County and that community would not know just how dangerous this stuff was. So that's where we're at with this. So you can tell I'm real emotional about it. Now listen, these workers. Now I want to just kind of set the scene for you. Is they're working, they're starting to get sick. This is a big old job site, right? It was huge. And so it wasn't like the workers were seeing each other every day. They were working in different zones or whatever. But they start having some common problems. And I want John to talk about that a little bit. The testosterone, the skin stuff. Tell me a little bit about how you all started talking about having the same conditions.
Well, generally we would see each other around lunchtime, or you'd break off into a bunch of different groups. You saw kind of the same group, but you might not be working in the same area. And you'd just kind of be talking, and we got to noticing, and I still have them, and I'm sure Jeff and Ansel do too. We got to noticing that we would have little sores come up on us. And just like I talked earlier about the sores in our nose, after I left down there and had a little time to look at stuff, I got online and kind of researched it a little bit, and it's a sign of arsenic poisoning. And we just got to, I've got these, so I've got those too, and I'm coughing too, and we all kind of stepped back and was like, wait a minute, I've never smoked in my life. Why would I have a cough all the time? I even asked my mother, did I have any kind of breathing issues? And she said, not even as a baby. You never had any of that. You didn't have whooping cough or any of that, but we just kind of all got to comparing notes, and we've all got the same thing. None of us ever had it before, and you just kind of put 2 + 2 together. So then we got to asking about tests. Well, we find out that the only test they've ever done with this stuff with humans is a test where people were doing an outage, which is 30 days. We were down there, I was down there 4 years, and Ansel and Jeff were down there. Ansel was down there longer. I think Jeff may have been there a little longer than that too. but that's the test they're throwing out there is on people that were in it for 30 days.
Right, and that's the thing. This was long-term exposure, which had never been tested or really done. I mean, this was a national disaster, if you will, because it was unusual for it to happen, and with this much coal ash and that much cleanup. Now, at some point, you started getting suspicious enough that you wanted to record some stuff. So talk about that.
Yes, I finally just it was like we had been in they'd laid such a smoke screen, and finally the smoke cleared for me, and I was like, wait just a minute here. They've told us all along, oh, you can eat this, you can drink it, you couldn't eat enough of it to hurt you, you could eat 2 pounds of it a day, you could drink it and whatever. And finally I was just like, I'm going to record, just carry a tape recorder in my pocket, and I'm going to record some of the answers that these people give us. Mm-hmm. Just to give you, for instance, in the TVA employee handbook, it states plainly, if you're at a place that has ash, you're supposed to have an industrial hygienist. And so in a meeting one morning, I asked Tom Bach, who
again is Jacob's safety manager.
Who is Jacob's head safety man? I said, who is our industrial hygienist? I would like to talk to him about these places on my skin. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I am. And I said, well, I don't want to really say you're lying, but I would like to see your certificate or diploma or whatever you have. And he said, well, you've offended me. And I said, well, I don't walk in a place that has doctor over the door and believe he's a doctor till I see his certificate hanging on the wall. Right. For all I know, it could have been a barber shop, but
and folks, Tom Bach is not an industrial hygienist, by the way.
Exactly. And I asked for his paperwork, and he acted offended, and it was never produced. And it was just stuff like that constantly, and I had a legitimate reason to want to talk to an industrial hygienist. Right. There's actually another tape. It wasn't one I made. I've heard it and seen all the stuff where a guy was kind of having he thought a sinus cold, and his doctor told him he ought to wear a dust mask. Well, he went to Tom Bach's subordinate, whose name was Chris Ike, and asked him, my doctor's telling me I need to wear a dust mask to be in dust till I get over this. Like you wear to mow the yard. Right. And he asked the guy, and he's got his tape recorder in his pocket at the time, and he just asked him, said, what will happen if I wear a dust mask on this job site? And I'm not going to say the exact words, but basically his answer was, if you wear a dust mask here, you'll be hanging yourself with your own genitals.
Right. Now that's the attitude, folks, that permeated this site. So you not only had the lying, but you also had the minimization, and there was some mocking going on. Do y'all remember that bit about the testosterone? Somebody tell me about that.
Well, I guess I'll tell since I was talking. It went down that one of I think he was called a superintendent.
Was it Dwayne Rushing?
Dwayne Rushing.
Yeah, he was one of the TVA people now.
Dwayne Rushing. And it actually got out, and there should be record of this, but my bet is there's not. Okay, he's admitted it. There were guys that were testing low on their testosterone, and he made the comment that to tell all the guys that were testing low on for their testosterone that he'd be happy to take care of their wives.
So get that, let that bake in. A TVA supervisor who is being told that dozens of workers are suddenly experiencing really low levels of testosterone, which should have been a red flag of a problem. And when the workers went to rushing about it, and this is at a forum, he's admitted this. He makes this comment, makes fun of them essentially. That was the result. And then, of course, there was no follow-up. Rushing has admitted he never told TBA that these workers were complaining at all. So that's what that story is. That's the kind of environment, that's the kind of folks that we are talking about in this case. It is a travesty, and I don't mind saying that. When we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more. 656-TALK, 1-800-951-TALK. This is News Talk 98.7. George Cordes, state your case, and I'm Jane. All right, folks, we are back. This is News Talk 98.7. This is George Cordes, state your case, and I am Jamie Satterfield with the Knoxville News Sentinel, filling in for George. And I've got a lady, bless her heart, Julie, has been hanging on, waiting to talk to and about my coal ash workers here. We've got workers here who have been sickened as a result of working in the coal ash and TBA Kingston coal ash spill. That cough is a symptom that they now struggle with. So, Julie, I'm going to try to get you on here if I don't mess this thing up. So, let's see. Nope, two's not going to work, is it? Oh, there we go. Julie, are you with us?
I am.
All right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for giving everyone a voice. I just wanted to say, during the cleanup, these people were deprived of dust masks. Now they're being deprived of life-saving health care. I mean, a lot of these people have already died. They don't have health insurance. I'm going to try not to cry as well. But, some of these medications are $400 a prescription. Mm-hmm. And, so they've got lawyers that are being paid by the ratepayers, the people in our community of East Tennessee. East Tennessee is a great place, and we love each other. But our people that went down there and worked on this, they were not told what was going to happen to them. They were denied protective gear, and now a lot of them are suffering in silence because they cannot afford the life-saving medications to extend their lives. So these people not only are, profited by the cleanup, they are now profiting by these people suffering. And that's all I want to say.
Well, thank you, Julie. I appreciate you calling in. And she's exactly right. Jacobs Engineering is fighting tooth and nail to keep from paying anything.
And the sad part is that they are now profiting. Their lawyers are profiting by this. The longer they draw this out, the longer the ratepayers pay their bills.
That's true.
The more motions they bring before a judge to try to get out of doing what's right, the more money their lawyers make, and the more people become sicker. They can't afford their medicine. Without medicine, your disease progresses faster. It reminds me a little bit of 9/11 when all those good people ran in to help, and they were sickened by all the toxic things that they had to breathe, and they were doing the right thing and trying to help, and they weren't even being paid. Some of them were, but then they became sick, and they had to get an act of Congress to get insurance or just to help with their medical bills.
Right. And then this is very similar.
And you look at the people in Oak Ridge that are now dead, and they're still playing commercials about, if you were, in Oak Ridge during the Cold War, there's help. Well, most of those people are already dead, and they're still airing commercials. Right. And this is what worries me about these folks here. A lot of them will already be dead when the lawyers get tired of filing motion after motion to delay this. They need help now.
Right. Well, Julie, thank you for calling. I've got William on the air, hopefully, if I'm, again, doing this right. William, are you with us?
Right here.
All right. What have you got to say about this?
Hey, I live down here in Rowan County and do a lot of walking down by the lake. And I see trucks still coming out of that area, hauling Do you know anything about those? The Gibco company, the big old pickups hauling out of there every day. Are they still hauling the same stuff?
Well, according to TVA, that answer would be no.
Okay.
Now, I'll be honest in that I've gotten calls from different workers or former workers who suggest that not all that coal ash was gotten out of that site. And in fact, there is a ball field, soccer field.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about, right there, Swan Pond. I have had workers who tell me, and let me tell you, these people are honest as the day is long. If they wanted to make stuff up, they would make it sound so much worse, and they don't. But I've had several workers tell me that they tried their best. That's the way they put it. They tried their best to get all that ash out of there, but they just they couldn't. TVA was pressing on time, and I am a firm believer, based on these workers, that there very well may be coal ash still out there under that ball field and out on that site. But again, now TVA will have a barrage of lawyers on me in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
They insist.
All right. Hey, here's another question. Another question.
Go ahead.
For you. Hello.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, another question.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are involved in the suit? How far along are they in the suit, and who are they just having to working this on a contingency fee with the lawyers?
There are, 180 in one suit, because we got two different courts working in.
Okay.
180 in the Roane County case. In the federal case, I think we're
51.
Ansol's telling me 51. I think we've gone up to 70 something since then. I think we've added some folks.
Oh yeah.
So clearly over 200.
Okay.
And yes, obviously, I don't know the pay arrangements, but no one is paying these attorneys on behalf of. So workers that are able to pay, I'm sure they've worked out a deal on that. But largely, these attorneys are taking a soaking because they're having to get experts and all of that stuff. And these are working class people who can't work. A lot of them can't work anymore.
I know, that's the kicker right there. I mean,
so not only have you made them sick, but you deprived them of the ability to make money.
And Jamie, these last two callers, they need to realize just one medicine that I take, the Advariant steroid inhaler. It's almost $500.
Wow.
$490-something.
Keep fighting. That's all I can say.
William,
keep fighting.
I would not walk around that place. I've witnessed and seen geese there having convulsions because of the ash and the radiation that they've been exposed to.
Oh, yeah.
And they just walk by and pick them up, throw them in a bag, and take them back and feed them to the coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the coyotes are laying around kicking, too.
Oh, yeah, I don't walk down there. I walk down by the lake right in Kingston. No, I stay away from that place. No way I'm going down there.
Yeah.
I know what it looks like. I've ridden by, but it's huge. People need to understand that, how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, go down there.
So many heavy metals that's in that. You know, we just mentioned mercury and arsenic and thallium. Mentioned that to 60 Minutes, how dangerous the thallium was.
No.
Aluminum, arsenic, asbestos. We found asbestos on the site.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And dust flying 60 feet in the air where we've been running over it. It won't hurt you as long as it's in this solid form.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, wake up.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Kingston was finished in 1955, and so from 1955 until 2013, when I retired, that ash pile has been taking stuff on that they've put in it, and the more you put on top of it, the hotter it gets down in the center of it, the more that it cooks and creates different chemicals and gas. And when that thing blowed out, for the first month that we was working in a blue haze.
Oh, yeah.
At night, you could see it glisten.
And at what?
Yeah.
Listen, I know people. I know. I've got friends at homes where the stuff was in their front yards.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I know that area well. That's why I stay away anymore. Again, keep up the good fight, man.
Well, thank you, William.
Hey,
Thanks
my
for
heart's out to
listening.
you.
All right. Yeah, tell me a little bit about that, guys. What it looked like. I know people talked about it. It was glittery. You could see metal. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it glistened. If you your headlights,
Especially if you go down there and it was a little dark, you had the lights on, it looked like glitter.
yeah, fairy dust is what we called it.
And you would have I thought at one point I had internal bleeding of some kind because I had that rusty, bloody taste all the time in my mouth.
Yeah.
But it was the metal.
Right.
And it was rust, I guess.
We've got Kyle. I've got a little note here. He wants to talk about criminal charges. Let me tell you, so do I. All right. So let's see if we can get Kyle on here. Maybe. All right, Kyle, are you with us?
Yes.
All right. How are you?
I'm okay, Jamie. I don't see any much difference in this than if I invited someone over to dinner to my house and fed them poisoned food.
No kidding.
I would be charged criminally, and I think these people that knew and let this happen, I think they should send them away for 30 years. And you know what? The next company that comes to do something like this, and the workers know, and they lie to the employees and say, no, you can't have protective gear. Think of Jacobs or whatever this company is, and the guys that went away for 30 or 40 years. And you know what? I bet they'll either quit their job or make sure that the people get protective gear.
You're right, and I will say now that's what I've been pushing. Russ Johnson, who's a DA out there in Rome County, is part of his district, and I want to give that guy props because he has pushed the state of Tennessee. It would be TDEC that's kind of a key component, and just can't get anything done. Part of the problem that Jacobs anticipated is that because of the nature of the illnesses, a lot of time has elapsed since the spill, since the workers left, and now the workers are sickened. And so those statute of limitations that comes into play, has too much time elapsed. There is a federal law I found, and Dave Jennings, U.S. Attorney's Office, I am talking to you. Doug Overby, talking to you. There is a federal law that directly addresses a situation where a contractor like this knowingly, intentionally endangers either citizens or workers, and clearly these workers have made a case on their own. Thank you very much. That there was intentional bad acting on the part of the Jacobs Engineering's supervisors out there. I have again been pushing for criminal investigation.
And you know what really insults me as living in East Tennessee and being a TVA customer, because I have electricity, I'm paying, I'm highly aggravated at what they've done to these people, but now I'm going to pay probably higher rates to defend the people that damaged these workers.
I know, right?
It's just insult to injury.
It is.
I just can't believe it.
Well, Kyle, thanks for listening and calling in, and you're a ratepayer, and all of you folks out there are ratepayers, and you're paying to defend this company. We're going to take another short break here, and when we get back, I want you to hear from a special lady who's close to my heart that's involved in this case. So when we get back, this is News Talk 98.7. I'm filling in for George. All right, folks, this is Jamie Satterfield with the Knoxville News Sentinel. I'm filling in today for George Corda on State Your Case on News Talk 98.7. And with me for this whole 2 hours, we have had workers who have been sickened as a result of working in coal ash, long-term exposure to coal ash, in the cleanup of the 2008 spill out there in Roane County in the Swan Pond community. That was real TBA's fault. And one of the things that the inspector said about that was that TBA had been treating coal ash like it was nothing but garbage, that you have in your kitchen. I'm guessing you don't have arsenic and thallium and radium and just start naming all the chemicals in your garbage. So, but it was Jacobs Engineering that was placed in charge of the cleanup and the worker safety, and it is Jacobs Engineering that is being accused, particularly Tom Bach, the supervisor, of lying to these workers, intentionally denying them protective gear. So that's what we've been talking about. I've got Scott is on the line very quickly. We're going to see what Scott's got. Hi, Scott.
Good morning or afternoon, Jamie. What I told the call screener, and then I had time to think about it, was that in this day and age, I have a hard time imagining why a company would be so galactically stupid. Then I realized TVA is part of the government, and this Jacobs company is a government contractor. And while I was on hold, I got to thinking about my time in the Air Force. I was a nuclear weapons technician. For 4 years, I worked around nuclear warheads. There was no such thing as a Geiger counter anywhere in sight. I never seen one. Coincidentally, I don't know whether it's coincidence or part of it, I never managed to have no children. But when it's the government involved, they can sweep a ton of crap under the rug. And it's always going to be the worker or the person that does it that basically takes it. Now, one caller that I disagreed with, not anything she said other than about the lawyers making more money. I mean, irregardless of whether we like them, think it's reprehensible or not, everybody is entitled to defend themselves. I mean, even I was an acquaintance of Gary Christian, and everybody was going after the lawyers of them animals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
even
those people had a right to defend themselves, as reprehensible as they are.
And thanks for the call, Scott. It should be noted, though, I think what's important here is that the ratepayers are paying the lawyers for Jacobs. That was part of the deal between Jacobs and TVA, was if Jacobs were to be sued, that TVA would pay the bills. And the last documents that I received, TVA won't address it, but the documents I received indicated that TVA had been paying Jacobs Engineering legal bills, and the workers having to pay their own, and as well as their medical costs. I want you to hear, folks, a little bit from Jane Clark, Ansol's wife. As you heard, if you've been listening, he was hoping to retire, and Janie, I want to talk a little bit about what this has done to your life. I mean, what's your life now versus what you thought it would be when he finally was able to retire?
Well, Jamie, first of all, I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
And I say God bless you, because up until you came on the scene, it was largely ignored. Nobody thought about it, cared about it, talked about it. It was shoved under the rug. And I'll tell you, one thing for sure, I didn't think any time in my life I'd be sitting here talking on News Talk Radio about this. That's one thing. We're just simple people, and we just live our lives, and we never expected to be caught up in this. Health issues, worrying about trying to keep insurance, sickness. And I'm so disappointed. I'm disillusioned. This is sort of like living in a novel. I wake up and I can't believe that this has happened. And one thing I want to say about this, I want people to hear this. When Ansel first went to the doctor when they found out that he had a blood disorder. Well, he had a stroke, and it was through having the stroke that they did the blood checks and found out that he had a blood check. And the first thing they said when they came into the room, and after they had looked at his chart and looked at all the chemicals and elements that he was exposed to, that they ask you, when you fill out the paperwork about blood disorders, the first thing they asked him was, "Do you work at Oak Ridge?" And he said, "No, I worked at the Kingston coal ash cleanup spill." And so through their testing, he has got a gene mutation. He didn't have it when he started,
right?
But he has now. And they're only, at this time, I have the documents that I researched it. There's a lot of information. It's such a rare disease. Only 100,000 people, recorded cases in the United States, have this. Now, what are the odds of a healthy person
who's all they did was work at this site?
Yes. Without a dust mask, he breathed that every day. So, knowing that you got this is blood cancer.
Right.
We don't like to say that word.
Right.
It's chronic, but it is treatable. But I would just like to ask Jacobs, how would you like to have those odds?
Right.
Tell my husband that he brought this on himself. He did protect himself. That's what I think about every day. I wake up, I think about it. I go to bed, I think about it. We'll never be the same. It's just unbearable to think that people can do that to you. And that's what our life is like. We're living with this. And the thing is, this disease is only found through blood tests. You may not even know you have it.
And I don't want to interrupt, but that's one thing I did want to point out before we wrap this thing up, is there are workers who may be spread out across the country, these workers, who may be sick and not have made that connection with the Kingston site because they may have worked at other jobs since then. So, I know that these attorneys are really encouraging family member, anybody that hears about this, if you or a loved one worked at Kingston coal ash spill and you are sick, it might be worth your while to give these folks a call about this case.
And why would TVA or Jacobs not decide to be responsible and pick up a list of everybody that worked there and find out how many are really sick?
Absolutely. Wouldn't you want to know that?
Well, both companies have been irresponsible since their inception.
Right.
Period.
Right. And I got to tell you folks, if you're a ratepayer, this ought to really burn you up. We have reached the end of the show, and I could go on listening to them talk for hours, but the reason I brought them on is I want people to be aware. I can't do anything except to tell their story and allow them to tell it. This is wrong, shouldn't have happened, and let's hope they see some justice while they're still alive and able to see it. I just want to hear somebody say this was wrong and somebody ought to go to jail for it. That's my feeling. So I'm Jamie Satterfield. This is George Corda, State Your Case. He'll be back next week. And thank you so much for listening to these workers and caring about them.
You've been listening to State Your Case with George Corda, brought to you by Christian Healthcare Ministries. Tune in again next Sunday for State Your Case, right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.